I was folding towels in the kitchen, my hands moving almost by habit, when I heard the hushed voices. At first, I thought I was imagining it after all. You learn to ignore whispers when you've lived long enough, but no. These were real, and they weren't meant for me. You need to say something. Clara's voice snapped, low but sharp, tight with impatience. Your mother can't live with us forever. She's not helping. She just takes up space. Michael's voice followed, quieter, hesitant. She raised you. But that's not the point. We've got bills, stress, and she just sits there all day. She's dead weight. I froze. The towel slipped from my hands onto the counter. Dead weight. I had heard those words before, but never aimed at me with such cold precision. I stepped forward, my voice soft. Careful. I heard you, I said. Clara flinched. Michael turned, eyes wide. I didn't mean it like that. He stammered. It's exactly what you said. I replied calmly. You just didn't think I'd be listening. Silence filled the kitchen. The air was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. I folded the last towel, my hands shaking slightly, and placed it on the stack. My heart, though, beat steady, slow, strong. I had survived worse than words. And still, some words linger. Later that night, dinner was a minefield. My hand trembled as I set a bowl of soup down. Arthritis had made itself known in cruel ways lately. And the bowl slipped, spilling warm broth onto the tablecloth and then onto Clara's lap. Seriously, Clara hissed, her tone sharp, judgmental. Before I could apologize properly, she slapped my hand away. Hard. Then, without hesitation, she slapped my face. It wasn't the sting that hurt the most. It was the silence that followed. Michael just stood there, mute, unmoving. He didn't say a word. He didn't intervene. He looked at me briefly, then looked away. That was the moment I realized something I hadn't wanted to face. He wouldn't defend me. Not now. Not ever. Maybe. And then came a sound that cut through the tension. The creak of the front door opening. Mom. Anne's voice. My youngest daughter. I hadn't seen her in over a year. She stood in the doorway, suitcase in hand, face stunned. She had just signed her divorce papers 3 days ago. She had called me, sobbing, unable to breathe through the pain. She saw the red mark on my cheek, the spilled soup, the way I stood holding myself together with nothing but shame. And then she saw Clara. You touch my mother again, and I will break both your hands, Anne said through clenched teeth. Michael jumped up, anger flaring. What the hell? You don't live here. You can't come in here acting like some hero. Anne turned slowly, calm but firm. You let your wife hit Mom. You let her call Mom a burden and just stood there like a coward. She's not helping us. She just takes up space. Yow, just like your wife, useless. A divorced parasite running back to her mother the second life got hard. Both of you are useless. I stepped between them. Enough, I said. Both froze. I turned to Anne first. You are not useless. Then I looked at Michael. And you. You are not my son anymore. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. I walked back to my chair by the window. The same one they had said I stared out of like a ghost. But I wasn't a ghost. I was alive. Alive and done. For years, I believed giving equaled love. That loyalty, when paid silently, would one day echo back in warmth. I was wrong. I remembered the house I had sold to help Michael buy his. A small brick home I had lived in since he was 9. I remembered every graveyard shift, every penny saved by mending clothes, skipping vacations. That house had been mine, my sanctuary, my labor of love. And for them, it had meant nothing. When they had been expecting their second child, they came to me wide-eyed and hopeful. There's this perfect house. Mom, Michael said. Good schools, a yard, room for everyone. But we're short on the down payment. I hadn't hesitated. How much? They said a number. I wired it. Within a week. I didn't ask to be on the deed. Didn't want them to feel burdened. Just a home for the babies. I told myself. I moved into their guest room. A small space between the laundry and the garage. No window. A mattress on the floor. but I convinced myself it was enough. I was close to the grandchildren. I could help. I could belong. And help. I did. Every weekday. I watched the kids' pickups, drop-offs, fevers, nightmares, homework, bedtime songs. I cooked dinner most nights, washed their clothes, repaired ripped backpacks, never asked for thanks, never received any. Then came the first envelope. Final notice. Mortgage. Michael brushed it off. Clara grumbled about bills. I paid quietly. Set up a monthly payment covering half the mortgage. Never told them. I didn't want to embarrass him. He was my son. Month after month. I paid. And month after month. They never asked where the money came from. Maybe they didn't care. Clara changed slowly small things first. Eye rolls when I offered to make lunch. Correcting me sharply when I told the kids old family stories. You're lucky we have space for you. Not every family does. She said once. Her tone sharp as a blade. And Michael. Silent. Always. I tried. I baked her favorite bread. Even when she called my recipes dated. Folded laundry. Sewed buttons. Cooked meals. She never noticed. And when she did, it was to remind me how lucky I was to have space in their home. The night Clara slapped my hand from the soup marked a turning point. That second she touched my face and Michael didn't move. Something inside me shifted. I would no longer be invisible. I would no longer be used. I made a decision that night. I would reclaim my life. On my terms. The next morning, I called the bank. Confirmed that my name was still listed as the payee on the mortgage. Even though I wasn't on the deed. I stopped payments. Redirected every future communication to Michael and Clara. I took back what was mine. Not for revenge but for clarity. For dignity. And with that, a quiet sense of relief settled over me. The weight lifted not just from my shoulders, but from my heart. The guest room had become my world. A small, narrow space tucked between the laundry and garage, with a window that barely let in the morning sun. It wasn't much, but it was mine by necessity, not choice. Every morning, I would wake up to the hum of the washing machine and the soft creaks of the floorboards as Michael and Clara moved about. Preparing for work, I kept my presence quiet, almost invisible. I didn't want to upset anyone, didn't want to draw attention. I thought, maybe if I'm small, if I do everything right, they'll see me as family again. But the truth was, I wasn't family. I was a fixture, a shadow, someone who simply was. I spent my mornings in silence, making breakfast for the kids before they ran off to school. Pancakes on Mondays, oatmeal on Tuesdays, eggs and toast on Wednesdays. I kept the kitchen spotless, dishes washed before anyone could complain, floors mopped, counters polished. It was a routine I had perfected over decades. But no one noticed. No thank you, Mom. No acknowledgement. Only expectations. Only reminders that I wasn't really part of their world. Michael's children adored Muel. The little ones did. Lucy, the youngest, would curl up next to me in the mornings, whispering secrets she didn't dare tell her parents. But every time I hugged them, a bittersweet ache filled me. I loved them like my own flesh and blood. Yet I knew, deep down, that their parents, very people who should have appreciated saw my love as something that came naturally. They didn't see the effort, the hours, the quiet sacrifices, and the mortgage. Every month, I quietly transferred funds, ensuring their home remained theirs. Michael never asked. Clara never thanked me. I didn't even expect recognition. I thought my actions alone would speak volumes, but silence answered me. One evening, after a particularly long day, I sat on my narrow bed in the guest room, looking at the faint light filtering through the blinds. Anne had called me earlier, crying about her divorce, her voice shaking, telling me how lost she felt. I had held the phone, whispered words of encouragement, offered advice, reassured her that she was stronger than she realized. After the call, I sat there, staring at the wall, feeling the weight of years pressing down on me. I thought about the sacrifices I had made, about my youth spent working, raising children, paying bills, patching wounds both emotional and physical. And now I was living in the shadows of a home I had helped build. treated as if I were an afterthought. Then came the little reminders, Clara's rolling eyes when I suggested a family dinner, Michael's sighs when I offered to drive the kids to soccer practice, small remarks about my age, my inability to keep up with their fast-paced lives. They were subtle, but each one was a dagger to my heart. One day, I overheard Michael talking to a colleague on the phone, pride in his voice. Yeah, Mom pays half the mortgage now. She's great. Really? Can't imagine living without her. But then he laughed. A short, dismissive sound. Of course. She's useless around the house. But hey, that's Mom. I clenched my fists under the table. Tears stung my eyes. I wanted to scream, to throw every dish I had washed onto the floor. But I didn't. I had learned long ago that keeping calm was my shield. My silence was my weapon. The kids noticed the tension. Of course. They asked why I looked so tired, so sad. And I smiled, brushing off their concern. Just a little tired. Sweetheart. Nothing to worry about. I wanted to tell them the truth, that adults could be cruel. That sometimes love wasn't returned, but I couldn't. I couldn't burden them with the darkness of the adult world when they had so much light to hold on to. And then there was Anne. She came to visit often, bringing life and warmth wherever she went. Her presence was a reminder of the family I had once known, the bond that had never broken. She didn't judge me for my quiet compliance or my invisible existence. She simply saw me. And in those moments, I could almost believe that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for reclaiming my life. The breaking point came one rainy afternoon. Clara had left the kids at home while she ran errands, and I was tidying up after lunch. Michael had been working from home that day, glued to his laptop, eyes narrowed in concentration. Suddenly, the screen slid, the laptop toppling slightly. He swore under his breath, a mix of frustration and exhaustion. I offered to help. No, Mom, I've got it. He snapped, sharp and impatient. Just stay out of it. Seriously, you're more trouble than help. That was it. I stopped moving, hands frozen over the dish towel. My heart pounded, but I felt a calm rise in me, something I hadn't felt in years. Enough. Later that evening, Anne arrived. She saw the bruised look in my eyes, the forced calm in my posture. She sat across from me, her voice soft but firm. Mom, you don't have to do everything for them. You've done enough. You've given enough. And they don't even see it. But I see it. I see you. Her words were a balm. I let myself cry, the tears soaking into the folds of my sweater. For the first time in years, I didn't try to hide my pain. I didn't try to smile through the hurt. I let it out. That night, Anne and I stayed up late, talking, sharing memories, laughing, and crying. She reminded me of the strength I had always possessed, the resilience that had carried me through decades of trials. She said, Mom, it's not too late. You can take back your life. You deserve to be happy, not just useful. Her words ignited a spark, a quiet, simmering fire that promised change. I began to realize that living in the shadows, being invisible, serving others without recognition, it didn't define me. I was still alive, still capable, and still deserving of respect. By the end of the week, I started small. I organized my personal papers, checked my finances, and made a plan. No one would see it coming. The mortgage, the household contributions, they had been mine all along, and I could choose what to do with them. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their thanks. I needed my freedom. It was in these small acts of reclamation that I felt my old self returned, woman who had built homes, raised children, survived illness and loss, the woman who knew the value of her worth, even if the world around her tried to deny it. And I realized, for the first time in years, that life wasn't over. My story wasn't just about giving and being invisible. It was about survival, about reclaiming dignity, and about finding the courage to say, I am more than your expectations. I am more than your neglect. I am alive. It started like any other evening. The sun had dipped behind the horizon, painting the living room in shades of orange and gray. I had been preparing dinner, moving quietly between the countertops, trying not to draw attention to myself. My hands shook slightly, Not from age, but from the exhaustion that had become my constant companion. Clara was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, the corners of her mouth tight, her eyes sharp. Michael was at the kitchen island, laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard, muttering under his breath. The kids were in their rooms, probably doing homework. I placed a plate of food on the table. "Dinner's ready," I said softly. Clara didn't look up. "Finally. About time," she snapped. The words cut, but I swallowed the sting and smiled faintly. I reached over to adjust a napkin for the kids. And that's when it happened. Clara's hand shot out. She slapped my wrist so hard the plate rattled. "Stop touching things. Mom, you're making a mess." I pulled back my hand, startled. Just what?" she snapped, her voice rising. "Just trying to act like you belong here. You're dead weight. Mom. Always have been. Always will be." The words hit like a hammer. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I opened my mouth, but no words came. For years, I had endured subtle remarks, eye rolls, unspoken criticisms, but hearing it spoken aloud, aimed directly at me, shattered something deep inside. And then the slap came again, this time across my face. The sting was sharp, immediate, but the real pain came from the realization. Michael didn't move. He just sat there, silent, watching. It was in that moment that the front door opened. Anne, my youngest daughter. She had sensed something was wrong the moment she called. She walked into the living room, her eyes widening at the sight before her. Me, trembling slightly, hand to my cheek. And Clara, standing tall, smug, victorious. "Mom," Anne shouted, rushing forward. "What the hell is going on?" Clara turned, her expression hardening. "This is none of your business. Anne, stay out of it." "No," Anne said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. "Everything about this is my business. You touch my mother again, and I swear, you will regret it." Michael stood abruptly, confusion and anger flashing across his face. "Anne, calm down." "No," Anne interrupted, voice unwavering. "You both think it's okay to treat her like this, to call her dead weight, to hit her. She raised you, Michael. She gave you everything. And this is how you repay her." I couldn't speak. I just watched, heart swelling with a mixture of relief and fear. Anne's presence, her fierce love, was like a shield around me. Clara scoffed. "She's exaggerating. Mom's just sensitive. Always has been." Anne's eyes blazed. "Sensitive? She's human. She's your mother. And she's done more for you than you'll ever understand." I felt tears welling up. For years, I had endured, had given, had hoped, but this was different. Anne wasn't just seeing me. She was fighting for me. In the next few minutes, words were exchanged. Sharp, angry, and full of pent-up frustration. Anne refused to back down. Clara tried to maintain control, but Anne's determination was like a storm. Michael, caught in the middle, looked helpless, finally realizing the truth he had ignored for too long. By the time the argument ended, the room was silent except for our breathing. Clara stormed off, muttering under her breath, and Michael slumped onto the couch, avoiding my gaze. Anne turned to me, her hands on my shoulders. "Mom, are you okay?" I nodded, tears slipping down my cheeks. I think so. I didn't expect." "You didn't have to expect," Anne said softly. "You never did. But it doesn't matter anymore. We're going to fix this. Together." That night, we sat in my little guest room, talking late into the night. Anne shared her plans, her fears, and her own pain. She had gone through a divorce, felt abandoned, and yet she was here for me. For the first time in decades, I felt the weight lifting, not entirely, but enough to breathe. The next morning, Anne suggested we move. "Mom," she said, "you can't stay here. Not like this. You deserve better. We'll find a place together. Florida. Somewhere new. Somewhere we can start fresh." I hesitated. Leaving the home I had helped build, the walls filled with memories, felt like leaving a part of myself behind. But Anne's eyes, filled with determination and love, convinced me I had been living as a shadow, and it was time to step into the light. We packed what we could carry, every item a symbol of the life I had lived and the life I was about to reclaim. I didn't look back as we left. Not at Michael, not at Clara, not at the house that had once been a sanctuary and had become a cage. The drive to Florida was quiet, filled with reflection. Anne held my hand, a silent promise that we would rebuild, that we would heal, that we would thrive. For the first time in years, I felt hope, not the fragile, fleeting hope of waiting for recognition, but the steady, enduring hope of taking back my life. By the time we arrived, the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. I stepped out of the car, inhaling the warm, salty air. The ocean stretched before us, vast and endless, a perfect symbol of new beginnings. Anne smiled at me. "We're going to make this place home," she said. I nodded, a tear slipping down my cheek. For the first time, I truly believed it. And in that moment, I understood something vital. Life had not ended for me. It had simply been waiting for me to reclaim it. The bus rumbled over the cracked pavement, carrying me further from a life where I was unseen and unheard. I held my little suitcase tight, the wheels tapping a rhythm that matched the heartbeat finally calm inside me. Florida, sunshine, sea, and a chance to breathe without being measured, judged, or weighed. I stepped off the bus into the sticky warmth of a January morning, the air carrying salt and something softer possibility. The street smelled of wet asphalt and citrus, familiar yet strange. Every step on the uneven sidewalk felt like a step away from the shadows I had carried for decades. I didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't need to. The silence was enough. Anne's apartment was modest, perched just above a little seafood market. Beige paint, chipped railings, a cracked sidewalk leading up to the front door. But when I knocked, she opened it. In the world I had left behind Clara, Michael, the house, the long nights of shame fell away. She looked smaller than I remembered, but there was fire in her eyes. Fire I knew because it had once lived in me. "Mom," she whispered, and I stepped forward, arms open. The apartment smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something warm baking. A small oven had left its signature sweetness in the air. We didn't speak. Words weren't needed yet. We just held each other. Hours could have passed. Days. The clock on the wall ticked somewhere in the background, but the minutes were irrelevant. I finally pulled back slightly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We're safe now," I said softly. Her eyes glistened, and she nodded. That single gesture carried a weight heavier than any mortgage, heavier than years of being called dead weight. It was freedom. The first few days were quiet. Anne moved like a woman who had been holding herself together with tape and prayer for too long. She flinched at the phone, kept her back to windows, and locked the doors twice at night. I didn't push her. I folded laundry while she worked late shifts, made soup, left notes by her coffee mug, swept the floor. I waited, and slowly, she began to breathe again. First, small smiles while washing dishes, then laughter, soft and uncertain. Her footsteps stopped feeling like shadows, tentative in their own home. Each day she walked a little taller, a little freer. We went to the market together. I watched her interact with the shopkeepers, quiet at first, then with a growing confidence. She remembered how to laugh at the little things, the seagulls that demanded your toast, the neighbor with too many plants, the way the sun hit the sand in the morning. I realized how much she had forgotten about living because she had spent so long surviving. We started routines, small but grounding. Mornings with tea at the kitchen table, the light spilling across the counter like forgiveness. I baked bread aggie in small batches, cinnamon rolls, oatmeal cookies, and watched, learned, sometimes helped, sometimes just observed. I posted photos online of our small creations, and slowly, strangers became our audience. They bought cookies, bread, little handmade items Anne had once made in college but abandoned under fear and shame. We called it mother and daughter goods, a name born from necessity and pride. Every day, I watched Anne reclaim pieces of herself. She opened a small account, saving paychecks in a hidden envelope. I helped her make lists, prepare what shed need when the time came to cut ties completely. But fear clung stubbornly, as it always does. She would whisper at night, "I'm tired. What if I fail?" And I would take her hands and say, firmly, "You're not starting over. You're reclaiming what was stolen. We're doing this together." The apartment became our sanctuary. A few folding chairs, a secondhand sofa, a kettle, a handful of clothes, and a journal. No past, only what we were building together. I wrote pages, pouring out years of silence, heartbreak, and endurance. She drew, sketched, painted, letting the colors fill the spaces inside that words couldn't reach. We went to the beach, barefoot, letting the tide lap at our ankles. The sun rose over the horizon, and for the first time in decades, I didn't feel guilty for taking up space. We laughed, sometimes at nothing, sometimes at everything. Seashells became treasures, little jars of sand, poems on cards we sent to strangers who seemed to need them. Life felt simple, rich in ways I had forgotten existed. Evenings were quiet. We cooked together, sometimes sat on the floor eating rice and vegetables, sometimes grilled fish with lemon. Music played softly, no discussions of Michael or Clara, no heavy memories pressing down. The past existed, but it did not rule. One night, as I closed my journal, Anne fell asleep on the sofa. Her chest rose and fell, steady and unafraid. A faint smile lingered on her lips, the kind of sleep that only comes when the body and soul finally feel safe. I watched her, feeling a shift inside myself. I realized that leaving the house, walking away from silence and disrespect, had been the right choice. We were building life not as obligations to others but as women who finally had agency. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Anne's independence grew. And so did my peace. I planted herbs on the balcony basil, rosemary, lavender, and we tended them together. Each plant a symbol of growth, patience, and healing. We didn't need validation from anyone who had hurt us. The only witness to our lives was each other. We laughed more. We sang in the kitchen. We danced barefoot, twirling between chairs, letting the small apartment fill with joy. We mailed postcards to Lily, sometimes without return addresses, writing stories of seagulls and sunrises, sketches of sunsets and bridges. Whether she received them or not didn't matter. The act itself was our declaration. We were alive, we were free, and we were unbroken. And yet, life's quiet moments carried lessons too. One afternoon, a phone call came. Michael's voice, urgent, hollow, almost pleading. The house he and Clara had once occupied was in trouble. Debts piling, eviction notices looming. Anne and I looked at each other. There was no rage, no revenge, only recognition. We had given them everything we could, and now it was theirs to navigate. We didn't answer. We didn't need to. The past belonged to them. We belonged to ourselves. Walking along the beach that evening, Anne carrying her sandals though she never wore them, I felt the weight of decades lift from my shoulders. Each step on the sand was deliberate, joyful. The sun dipped into the water, painting the sky in pinks and oranges. We didn't speak. Words were unnecessary. Our presence, our laughter, our reclamation of life was enough. I realized then, fully, that I had not just left a house. I had left silence, invisibility, and the weight of being unloved in the hands of those who didn't deserve me. And in that departure, I discovered a power long forgotten, the freedom to live for myself, to be seen, to matter. And Anne, she thrived. Her smiles became genuine. Her voice grew stronger. Her laughter, once buried beneath fear and shame, rang through our apartment like a bell finally free. Together, we created a home, not just a place to live, but a sanctuary, a launchbed, a statement. We were not victims. We were women who reclaimed everything that life had tried to take. We planted rosemary that weekend, for protection. Anne said. I smiled. You don't need it anymore. She carried herself differently, each step a silent declaration that she belonged, that we both did. We were no longer shadows in someone else's house. We were light, warmth, and presence in our own home. And in that, I found something far greater than I had imagined. Not just survival, but thriving. Not just freedom, but joy. Not just a life, but living. The mornings in our small Florida apartment started quietly, but not in the hollow, heavy way I had grown used to. No clanging dishes, no whispered judgments, no slammed doors, just light spilling through the window, the scent of salt and lavender drifting in, and the gentle hum of life finally taking its own rhythm. I brewed a strong cup of tea, the aroma filling the tiny kitchen. Anne shuffled in, her hair mussed, her eyes soft but alert. She didn't rush, didn't apologize for occupying space, didn't flinch when the world moved around her. I watched her, a sense of pride mingling with relief. We were both survivors of a life that demanded too much and gave too little in return. I had spent decades shaping my actions around others, shrinking to fit their convenience, offering everything I had without ever asking if it was enough for me. And now, I was learning that giving could be different. Not sacrificial, not silent, but intentional, chosen, and full of love that didn't hurt me in return. Our days settled into a gentle rhythm. Mornings were for tea and journaling. Anne and I shared the space of quiet reflection. Sometimes she would look over my shoulder as I wrote, or I would peek at her sketchbook where she captured moments of her life in delicate lines and watercolors. She painted seashells, postcards, little snapshots of our walks along the beach, the sunlight hitting the sand in ways only she seemed to notice. Afternoons were for work and small joys. Anne had revived her old hobby of handmade jewelry and small crafts, selling them online. I helped her with packaging, printing labels, and organizing shipments. Each small order that left our hands carried more than a product. It carried our reclamation of freedom, a tangible proof that life could be rebuilt from scratch. We called it our mother-daughter goods, a name we laughed over but felt deeply connected to. It wasn't about money. It was about ownership of ourselves. I also began to bake again. Just small things at first: oatmeal cookies, banana bread, butter rolls, but every batch was a reminder that I could create, nurture, and care without being diminished. The smells of baking filled the apartment, and sometimes Anne would hum, a soft melody I hadn't heard in years, proof that joy was returning. Evenings were quieter, slower, a time for reflection. We would sit by the window, the ocean breeze brushing past, and watch the sun melt into the horizon. I had never realized how much I had missed these moments: simple, quiet acts of presence. No one was there to judge, to demand, to belittle. Just us, reclaiming our breaths, our time, our space. Sometimes, when the wind carried the faint scent of the seaweed or the distant hum of the market, I thought of the house I had left behind. The peeling paint, the worn floors, the memories carved into the pantry beams, Michael's birthday macaroni cards, the nights I had stayed up sewing costumes for school plays, the early mornings bringing breakfast to sleepy children. So much love and effort, unacknowledged, taken for granted. Yet I no longer felt the pang of loss. I had learned that holding on to hurt only kept me tethered to people who didn't see my worth. Anne, too, was healing. Her laughter became less guarded, spilling freely when she found humor in small things like the seagulls persistently stealing our toast, or the way a neighbor's dog would chase waves at the shore. She was learning that she didn't need permission to exist fully, to claim joy, to speak her mind. Watching her grow, unafraid and alive, reminded me that the life we had once thought lost could still bloom in unexpected ways. We started exploring. Small trips at first, quiet drives to nearby towns, a picnic by a lake, wandering through little craft fairs. Each adventure was a reaffirmation that life could be gentle, playful, and spontaneous. We visited local bakeries, took photographs of sunsets, and collected small seashells for our apartment shelves. I realized that these small rituals, mundane to an outsider, were our acts of reclaiming the life that had been overshadowed for too long. Some nights, we stayed up late, talking about everything and nothing. Stories of the past were shared cautiously, but we never lingered on the pain inflicted by Michael and Clara. It was enough to acknowledge it, to name it, and then let it rest where it belonged in the past. We spoke instead of dreams, of hopes, of places we wanted to see, and of the life we were building together. One particular evening, Anne and I sat on our small balcony with a simple dinner of rice and vegetables. The sky was painted in deep purples and fiery oranges. I watched her eyes reflect the colors of the sunset and felt a profound gratitude for her presence. "Mom," she said quietly, "I didn't know life could feel like this again. Like freedom." Her hand reached across the table, and I took it. "Neither did I admitted, smiling. "But here we are. We created rituals of our own making. Sundays were for beach walks, barefoot, carrying nothing but our laughter and a few sketchbooks. I taught Anne to bake bread from scratch, kneading dough while the sunlight poured over our hands. We painted our apartment together, not to make it perfect, but to mark it as ours. Each brushstroke, each color choice, a declaration of independence, of life reclaimed." I started writing more deliberately, journaling not only to release the past, but to record the life we were now living. Each page was a testament to survival, to the quiet courage it took to step away from toxic love and embrace self-worth. I wrote letters to Lily, my granddaughter, carefully describing our days, the scents, the sounds, the laughter, so she could feel part of our new life even from afar. As weeks turned into months, our bond strengthened in ways I hadn't imagined possible. Anne no longer flinched when making decisions. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, a subtle but undeniable presence. And I, too, felt the transformation. My steps were lighter, my voice stronger, my laughter more genuine. The weight of years spent shrinking, of being silent and unseen, lifted gradually, replaced with a tangible sense of agency and peace. Through small acts, we celebrated ourselves. Baking, walking, creating art, sending letters, organizing shipments, all of it was a declaration. We were here, fully and unapologetically. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And for the first time in decades, I felt the deep satisfaction of being exactly where I belonged. And yet, the world outside our apartment occasionally reminded us of the past. News from Michael or Clara, fleeting thoughts of old grudges, even memories of the house in Georgia. But we no longer carried the weight of others' cruelty. We acknowledged it, nodded at it, and let it pass. Our focus was forward, outward, and upward. I began to notice subtle changes in myself. I smiled more easily. I spoke with clarity, even when others attempted to diminish me. I allowed myself to rest without guilt, to indulge in small pleasures without fear of judgment. I realized that being a grandmother, a mother, or a caretaker didn't define my worth. My worth was inherent, independent, undeniable. Evenings ended with tea or a quiet glass of wine, our conversations meandering between future plans and reflections on the day. We sometimes hummed old songs, sang quietly, or simply listened to the sounds of the ocean. I noticed the difference in how our presence filled the space not as shadows, but as light. We started inviting small connections into our lives. Neighbors, friends from town, fellow artisans, people who were kind, sincere, and respectful. We celebrated small victories together, shared stories, and exchanged laughter that wasn't forced. Community, I realized, was not about proximity or obligation, but about choosing to surround yourself with those who uplift rather than diminish. By now, Florida no longer felt like a temporary refuge. It was a home not built on the absence of others, but on the presence of respect, love, and self-worth. And I, for the first time in decades, was no longer defined by the expectations of ungrateful children or the ghosts of past sacrifices. I was defined by choice, by resilience, by the courage to leave a life that had demanded too much and given too little. Anne and I had learned a vital truth. Life is not about avoiding pain but reclaiming joy. Not about erasing the past, but integrating it with grace. Not about being silent, but speaking, even if only to ourselves. And through it all, we discovered that the simplest acts, baking bread, sending letters, walking barefoot on the beach, could be revolutionary, could heal, could create freedom where there had once been confinement. The mornings in Florida had settled into a rhythm that felt natural, like breathing finally in sync with the world. The ocean stretched endlessly before us, A horizon that reminded me daily that life was infinite. Possibilities endless. Anne and I had created more than just a home. We had created a sanctuary. And in that sanctuary, I was learning the most important lesson of my life. I was not, and never had been, dead weight. The past lingered. Of course. Memories of Michael and Clara. Their dismissive words. Their cold gestures. Still hovered in the corners of my mind. But instead of anchoring me, they now served as markers, a reminder of how far I had come. How much I had survived. Pain that once defined me now strengthened me. Every insult. Every shove. Every silent betrayal had forged a resilience I would carry forever. We started our days slowly. I brewed strong coffee while Anne unpacked her sketchbooks, and we would sit on the balcony, feet dangling over the railing, watching the ocean glint in the morning sun. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. Silence had become a companion, not a void, and in it, we found peace. I thought often of the house in Georgia, the house that had once been mine and yet never truly felt like it belonged to me anymore. I thought of all the nights spent folding laundry quietly, cooking meals unnoticed, paying mortgages silently, and I realized, finally, that the value of my sacrifices had never been measured by recognition from others. It had always been about my own strength, my own integrity, my own heart. Anne and I began taking small trips, venturing further into Florida. The local farmers market became our Sunday ritual, the smell of fresh bread and citrus an aromatic celebration of life. We discovered hidden beaches where the tide washed smooth stones over our feet, and Anne started painting the sunsets we watched, capturing the fiery horizon in delicate strokes. I often watched her work, amazed at the woman she had become, a strong, independent, joyful, and unafraid. Our evenings were filled with small victories, little joys. I baked cinnamon rolls while Anne arranged flowers in glass jars. Sometimes we would sit on the balcony with tea, letting the sounds of waves and gulls fill the silence. Other times we hummed old songs, melodies passed down through years of memory. We laughed often, a laughter that was no longer tempered by fear or obligation. It was free, unburdened, full of life. One day, Anne looked at me, her eyes steady. "Mom," she said, "do you realize how far we've come?" I smiled, the sunlight catching the gray strands of my hair. "Every day," I replied softly. "It hasn't been easy, but it's ours now." She nodded, her hand resting over mine. "We're finally living for ourselves. Not for anyone else. Not for the weight they tried to place on us. We've reclaimed our lives." I thought about the lessons this journey had taught me. That love could be given without expectation. That resilience was not measured in silent endurance, but in the courage to stand up and walk away when needed. That dignity is something no one can take unless you allow it. That life's most profound freedom comes not from possessions or recognition, but from claiming your right to exist fully, unapologetically. I reflected on my children, not Michael, not Clara, but Anne, Lily, and those I had touched in my life. I realized that nurturing didn't always require proximity. Sometimes it required courage. Courage to leave behind what was comfortable, to stand for what was right, to create life where none had existed before. The ocean called to me one morning, a gentle insistence I could no longer ignore. I walked barefoot along the shore, feeling the sand cool beneath my feet, the waves washing softly over my ankles. Each step was deliberate, a small ceremony of freedom. I thought of the years I had given silently, the hours spent in shadows, the nights when I felt unseen. But I was here now, fully alive, fully present, fully myself. Anne joined me, carrying her sandals and a sketchbook. She held my hand as we walked, her touch grounding me, reminding me that love, true love, was not measured in sacrifice alone. It was measured in presence, in respect, in mutual care. We paused as the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of orange, pink, and gold. I inhaled deeply, the salty air filling my lungs with a sense of clarity I had never known. In that moment, I understood. The story of my life was not defined by betrayal or neglect. It was defined by survival, by resilience, by the courage to choose joy despite it all. I thought of Michael and Clara, and I felt neither anger nor longing, I felt only clarity. They had chosen their path. I had chosen mine. And mine was filled with love, light, and the freedom to finally live fully. We returned to our apartment and opened the windows, letting the ocean breeze sweep through, carrying away remnants of the past. I sat with Anne at the small kitchen table, holding my journal, pen poised. I began to write, not of pain, not of sorrow, but of hope, of love reclaimed, of life rediscovered. I wrote for Anne, for myself, for every woman who had ever been told she was too much, too old, too burdensome. I wrote to remind the world and myself that worth is inherent, that strength is cultivated, and that life is never truly over until we decide it is. And in that writing, I found peace, not the fleeting peace of avoidance, but the enduring peace of self-realization. I had survived the storms, the neglect, the cruelty. I had risen, rebuilt, and thrived. I had walked away from everything that diminished me, and in doing so, I had discovered the life I was always meant to live. As the sun dipped again into the horizon, Anne and I sat on the balcony, sipping tea, watching the ocean turn from gold to violet. We held hands, our fingers intertwined, a silent vow to continue living fully, fiercely, joyfully. I whispered softly to the wind, to the waves, to the life that awaited us each day. I am alive. I am worthy. I am free. And in that moment, I truly understood. My story did not end with being ignored or diminished. It ended with reclamation, with joy, with empowerment. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all.